Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to Armor of God again. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you will learn a lot from this video. Anyway, for this video, it's the second part of my interview with Father Joshua Waltz. And the focus of this interview was more about the life of a priest. So the first clip of the interview that I'd like to share in this video is about Catholic priests being associated with the pedophiles. What he thinks of it and how it has impacted his journey as a priest.
You know, in our diocese, it's not as bad. We have a really good diocese, good Catholics, um, good families. Uh, I think probably the biggest thing is like number one, we're just, you know, most of us, almost none of us did any of this stuff, right? This was before our times, generation before us, and now we get to suffer it, right? We get to try to, win the faithful back and win that trust back um, that has been lost. And yeah, I mean, I've been called a pedophile. I've been somebody spit in my face when I was over in Rome because of it. Called me a pedophile. Like sitting there, and I'm like, dude, I didn't do anything. Why are you pissed at me? I didn't do anything. But like, there's got to be reparation for what has happened, and it was so absolutely demonic and wicked. I mean, I have a school, right? And like, if I'm having a bad day, I just go over to Children's House, the pre-K, and I'm like a superhero, man. They just want to all give me a hug, and I get to do works with them. I play recess with them, and you look at that, and you're like, how could you possibly do something to somebody so innocent and so loving? So it's horrifically demonic. But the devil's real, man, and Judas was, he was in the 12 apostles. He's a bad dude. 1 out of 12, that's something like 7%. So if you look at the priesthood, 7%, yeah, maybe 7% have fallen into the lie that Judas fell into. But I just try to model good, healthy relationships with young people. I just went. It was kind of. I was like, I actually kind of had this. It's interesting. So my goddaughter, Veronica, love her to death. She's such a sweetheart, and gives me a hug after mass every single Sunday. And I go to as many things as I can. She sings in my choir, and she had a swim meet and invited me to the swim meet. And I got out of the car, and as I was walking to the swim meet, I'm like, what is this going to look like? Because this is like, it's kids that are from 8 years old to probably high school. It's boys and girls, and they're swimming, and a priest is walking into that. And like, I'm like, whatever. I was like, I can't live in fear. So I walked in, and man, I came in, and everybody's like, Father, I can't believe you came to this. Like, a priest has never come to this. And I'm like, well, my goddaughter's swimming. And then all of a sudden I'm like, and I know him and him and her and her and him and her and him. And I know all these families. And everybody's like, and then all the kids are coming over, and they're like, you came to our swim meet. And I'm like, yeah. And like, just had a blast, like had an absolute blast. And so we can't live in that fear. Like, I know who I am, and I love children. One of the greatest sacrifices of my life was giving up the chance to be a natural father. But the amount of spiritual children I have, it's unbelievable. It's hundreds, maybe thousands at this point. And so, yeah, somebody's got to suffer it, and I guess our generation has been chosen. When I joined seminary, I had got done filling out the paperwork. I got accepted, and the Boston scandal broke. So I have lived my priesthood. Ever since I joined the seminary through my priesthood, I have always been in the shadow of this scandal. And one of the things for me was, like, I remember when I joined and that happened, everybody's like, what are you doing? Like, why on earth would you want to be part of this institution, especially now, And I'm like, because that's not the priesthood. That's not what Jesus left us. Jesus left us the priesthood as spiritual fathers who minister and love the flock, who die for the flock. And I want to show people that that's what it really is, not what happened in Boston. That's not that's from the enemy. And like I really think that in that time there were a lot of guys that I knew that had the same sentiment, like, you know. And in some ways, like when Jesus says, that he was led as a lamb before the slaughter. I think some of us were too, without even knowing it. We were led to the slaughter. And but there's a lot of people that hate the church, but son of a gun, there are so many more that love the church. And that's really encouraging, really encouraging. And even the ones that hate the church, it's usually because somebody's hurt them in the church. And so my line always, whether it's in the confessional or in counseling or whatever, I meet somebody on the street and we just start talking about Jesus, and they're like, well, this person hurt me so bad that I just don't ever want to be part of the church again. And my thing is, I always say, hey, if it was one person that led you away from the church, maybe one person could bring you back, and show you what it really is. So that's kind of my line. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But
As for the second clip, I asked him this. How did the people around him react when he decided to become a priest? I was always curious about this, so I took the opportunity to ask him this.
yeah, I mean, I realized really quickly who my friends were. I was in all humility, I was a pretty popular guy, pretty well known. I was a big soccer player. I played a lot of sports, very athletic. I was a team captain for our soccer team. We lost back-to-back state championships, which so be it. That was part of the story too. It sucked at the time, but that's what led me to here. But yeah, when I got back from that trip, I was going to join seminary, and then I said, this is how I mean, we just play around with our words and mess around with God sometimes. But I was like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I did say if you want me to be a priest, not when you want me to be a priest. So I had this. I was like, okay, so I'll just get married. My wife will die, and then I'll become a priest. Like, and so I didn't go right away. I went through 4 years of college, and at the end of my time at college is when I made the decision to go. And man, when I made that decision, like, I bet I lost 90% of the people I knew. Like, I had some of the guys were like, you're gonna go join the pedophiles. You're gonna, I can't believe you're wasting your life. The girl I was with at the time, when I told her, that did not go well at all. Like, she just got furious about it. Um, so yeah, it was hard, but at the same time, it was kind of purifying because you sit back and you're like, you think you have all these friends, it's even worse now with social media. Like, I got, 1.2 million followers. Like, these are all the people that love me. They don't love you, man. Like, I mean, they might worship you in some weird sense as, through idolatry, but they're not your friends. And so, yeah, like when I changed my direction in life, yeah, I lost a lot of friends. But I mean, Jesus said, he's like, it's going to cost you. The cost of discipleship is high. We had our men's group last night. We were watching, this every Wednesday of the summer, we're watching season 4 of The Chosen. We've done it for the past 3 years, and now we're doing it this year. And watched episode 3 last night. And I won't. There's no spoiler here, but it really gets across like what it's going to cost you, and in the end, it's going to cost you your life. Now that might mean red martyrdom, where you actually die for the faith, but it might also just mean that it's costing you. You got to sacrifice a lot. But that's with anything, any relationship of love, you got to sacrifice. Like if a man chooses to get married, he has to sacrifice every other woman in the world. He can only have that one, and so sacrifice is just part of life. And the more you sacrifice, the more beautiful things become, I think. But it sucks, and we hate it, and most of us are not very good at it. So.
I also took the opportunity to ask Father Waltz to share one beautiful thing from his 17 years of priesthood.
I just actually had a really cool couple. They came up and they were like, hey, they were like, we're done having kids. And I'm like, don't ever say you're done having kids. Like, just be open to life. Like God asked you just to be open to life. And they just got pregnant. And so you're sitting back and you're like, man, they said, they're like, without you talking to us, we never would have had another child. There's a new human in the world because of a meeting I had. I'm not saying I'm responsible for that, but I'm like, there's another human being that now exists and is going to have a shot at life, and who knows what they're going to do simply because of that conversation. So there's some wild times. I mean, there's also like really hard times, man. I've been crucified numerous times because of decisions I've had to make. You know, as priests, we're called to be leaders, and everybody's like, we want strong leaders, and we want them to stand up for the truth. We want them to go out there and preach the gospel. And then, yeah, when I stand up and I preach the gospel and it's to this guy, and then he's like, well, I don't like this. And I'm like, dude, you just said you wanted the gospel preached, and now you don't like it. Or this person that, I have to, whatever, I have to replace, somebody on my staff, and they're struggling with it. And like, you just got to bear these crosses. And we, like the priests, we're kind of front row for God's show of grace, but we're also kind of front row for the crucifixion. And if you're living your priesthood correctly, you're going to go through quite a few crucifixions. I guarantee it. Like we are both priest and victim. Fulton Sheen said that very clearly. I mean, well, a lot of people said that very clearly. Fulton Sheen just came into my mind, but you can't just be priest. You're priest and victim. You hang with Christ on the cross. And that's why the holy hour is it's so necessary. Then we have, I have finance council, I have parish council, I have staff meetings, I have individual evaluations with my staff. I have 1,100 families in my parish. We got a school pre-K through high school. And I'm the only guy, I don't have an associate. So there's plenty to do. Not to mention funerals, weddings, baptisms. I mean, anointing of the sick. So coffee, man.
And like I said, I really enjoyed this interview, and listening to him talking about God and his role as a priest is truly a blessing. And I also asked him how it feels to have a brother as a priest too.
It's great. I mean, it's awesome. My brother and I, we're the only two kids in the family too, which is even more rare. I was sitting by this guy one time on a flight, and we got talking, and he was a lawyer. I think for like a basketball team or something, maybe an NBA team, or maybe it was college. But anyway, because I remember the basketball reference. But anyway, I was like, he got talking. He's like, yeah, you and your brother are both priests. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I think you'd have a better chance of two brothers being in the NBA than you would to have two brothers, like the only two brothers. And if you look at it statistically, it's probably true. It's incredibly, incredibly rare, but it's not that rare. In our diocese, we have 7 sets of brothers that are priests, and we're a relatively small diocese, And then you look back at the apostles, half of them were brothers, roughly. So it's there. But the nice thing about it is we're on the same page about everything. We're on the same team. We're on the same page. We pray together. We hang out a lot together. We minister together. It's been a huge blessing, absolutely huge blessing to have a brother as a priest, especially your only brother. Plus, we get to travel a lot together, which is really cool.
For the last clip of the interview that I'm going to share here is this. We know the devil hates priests, and I told him that they must be under greater temptations from the evil one. And I asked him about this, how he deals with the attacks from the enemy.
I think probably there's a lot of ways that the enemy moves against priests. Particularly recently, not recently, but I guess over the past 5 years, let's say, I've really experienced the power the enemy has through rumors and gossip. Like, it is so destructive, and it's not true, and people spread it, and these are Christians, these are Catholics, and it is, yeah. It's really, really draining. And a lot of the times, because of legal situations or whatever, you can't talk about anything, so you just kind of got to take it. And so for me, I mean, that's been one of the ways that he has really tried to discourage me, And all I do is I'm like, first of all, my conscience is clean, right? Like I didn't make anything up. I didn't do anything for the wrong reasons. I did it because this was what had to be done. Maybe it could have been handled better. I don't know, I'm doing the best I can. And so if my conscience is clean on something like that, and there's all this, stuff going on around me, I just go to the chapel, man. And I'm like, Lord, it's your church. Like, you called me to lead, and you're gonna have to fix this. And so far he has every single time.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully you've learned a lot from this interview. I'll share the next part of the interview in the next video where I asked him about The Chosen 2. Anyway, if you like what we do and if you are willing to support our works, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contribution, and prayers. Until the next one, stay safe, stay healthy, and may God bless you.